Several days ago, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe recognized Russian President Vladimir Putin as illegitimate following his election in March, which condemns Russian Orthodox Church as a spying organization which acts in the interests of the state.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Centre and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course. And I'm your host, Matt Wickham. In this episode, we discuss Putin being recognised as illegitimate by PACE. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video and don't forget to press subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any of our videos in the future. Oleksandr Chupak, head of the economic programs at the Ukrainian Center for Strategic Studies, sheds light on the international arrest warrant Putin faces, highlighting the difficulties for him to travel, plus PACE's recent statement condemning the Russian Orthodox Church's collusion with state interests and how it has been recognized as a destabilizing force working against other states. Let's take a listen.
Several days ago, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe recognized Russian President Vladimir Putin as illegitimate following his election in March, calling to states of Europe and other allies like the US to implement more stiff sanctions on the Russian regime. This decision follows many similar decisions made in the past, most notably the order issued by the International Criminal Court, which was done in March 2023, and according to which Vladimir Putin is a criminal which is being sought after around the world. So he cannot really travel to many countries because he may be arrested there. Also, the PACE issued a statement which condemns Russian Orthodox Church as a spying organization which acts in the interests of the state in a harmful to other states' interests. And also it calls to the allies, the countries, to recognize that Russian oil refineries are legitimate targets for Ukrainian weapons. We know that a few weeks ago there were news that American government was asking Ukrainians to stop bombing oil refineries because it might have driven oil prices up. But now we know that in Europe people are calling that Ukraine should be allowed to bomb those refineries in response to Russia bombing Ukrainian energy objects. So we can act in our own interest by using most notably Ukrainian-made drones and other equipment. Also, this decision by the Parliamentary Assembly, it follows the decision of the US Congress to give Ukraine the long-needed funding of $61 billion, which is going to bolster Ukrainian defenses and also give grounds to prepare for the advancement in the near future, maybe in 2025, as some experts predict. So we can grow our military, and this funding from the US, it also gives a green light to our other allies, for example, the United Kingdom and Germany, France, or anybody else who could give us more weapons. And we are really hoping for Europe to collect a Patriot anti-missile system, which could bolster Ukrainian air defenses in important cities like Odessa, Dnipro, Kharkiv, and Kyiv. So we are very glad to see Parliamentary Assembly's decision. It is going to be really helpful to accumulate such documents and eventually have the whole world united against the evil empire, against the Russian Empire, which should be destroyed, and only the destruction of the Russian Empire and the removal of Vladimir Putin from the office is going to preserve Ukrainian victory.
Andriy Yakovlev, lawyer, managing partner at Umbrella Law Firm, delves into the nuanced differences between how terms like terrorist are used in Russian discourse compared to the evidence-based approach taken by international bodies like the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe. Let's listen in more detail.
In general, the Parliamentary Assembly's decision, including its appeal, is a political decision. It lacks legal grounds that would impose binding consequences. However, it is pointless to claim that this decision will have no effect on any legal consequences because it's all about a loss of legitimacy. The loss of legitimacy is comparable to what happened to Yanukovych. He was officially the president, but he lost legitimacy and fled. So the loss of legitimacy is exactly what can alter what legal decisions cannot. This is why this call from the Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly, its legal body, is critical, as it is not a decision made by the country that supports Ukraine or is a staunch ally. This is a collegial body's decision which reflects the position. Furthermore, we know it was approved unanimously. This implies that there is an understanding that the Russian government can no longer be considered democratic and thus the practices it employs are illegitimate. Most importantly, I want to have this decision to have legal consequences so that every country or other international body makes similar decisions, and eventually it will limit the Russian government's and Putin's personal options for representing the Russian Federation. Unfortunately, there is no international instrument that recognizes a president's loss of powers. However, it is possible to make a political decision that allow us to discuss the loss of legitimacy, which in turn leads or should lead to other decisions that deprive him of the ability to directly manage or influence Russian political affairs. This is all in the future, but I believe the decision establishes a foundation, a background environment at this level. We could say that this is one step. There is a long way ahead. However, once we take this first step, we can cover any distance. I will not claim that this is the first step, but it is both symbolic and correct. It calls a spade a spade. This seems important to me.
Yakovlev speaks of the difference in how Europe defines terrorism versus how Russia defines it, which merely uses the term for political objectives. He also emphasizes the importance of why these European bodies shouldn't allow Russia to abandon all contact while Ukrainian POWs are still in Russian captivity. Let's take a listen.
I believe that there is a significant difference here. When you say that Russians call someone a terrorist, such organizations are not actually terrorists. These, for example, are what they say about Hizb At-Turi in Crimea, the Azov Battalion, and Dnipro 1. However, terrorist activity is considered socially dangerous. Terrorists, according to them, are actually those on a special list that the Russian Supreme Court has even legalized. So what do I mean? If they call someone a terrorist or use another term to describe them, it does not necessarily imply that they are indeed a terrorist. However, when it comes to the Council of Europe and their institutions, they refer to it as a loss of legitimacy, not because they arbitrarily use the term, but because they present arguments. They discuss legal grounds. They simply cannot reach a conclusion based on real facts, real statements of facts, that the loss of legitimacy was caused by numerous violations, unrepresentativeness, and violations of election procedures. That is, when Russia uses procedures that are used in other countries, but only to demonstrate that they have the same election process as other countries, despite the fact that the procedure is not electoral. I believe it is critical that when Russians refer to someone as a terrorist, their claims are not supported by evidence. And when we discuss decisions made by the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, or hopefully similar decisions, we are primarily concerned with facts and conclusions. We cannot accuse these bodies, including advisory bodies, of inventing something on their own. They explain what is happening. Yes, it is about international relations, specifically those with other countries. There is no supranational body to decide make a decision with legal consequences. But in international relations, everything is based on the fact that, I'm not sure we can use the term complementary here, but we can say that everything is based on some level of legitimacy. All contractual relationships are built on trust. And when we say that there are grounds for losing confidence in the Russian Federation, for losing confidence that their government is elected according to democratic procedures, we can say that it is undemocratic, and that we can say that it is totalitarianism or authoritarianism. All these definitions are important for democratic countries. For other countries, this may not be important, but for countries where democratic principles are applied, it is. It's all about differentiation. On the one hand, there are countries that adhere to principles, and when they say they have an election, it really is an election. Accordingly, they represent the results of voting. But when certain bodies, the Council of Europe, say, no, those are not elections there, and in accordance with this, conclusions, there are no fair elections there, they are unrepresentative. It means that the legitimacy of this is lost. This already says that there are countries without democracy, and there are countries with democracy. In fact, they were distinguished as a country that does not adhere to these principles. The only thing that bothers me is this. If Russia adheres to some other principles that follow their former commitments with the Council of Europe, this is very good because they still keep many of our people in captivity. So if they get rid of all their obligations, I don't think it will be good for us. Therefore, it is probably all about balance. International bodies want, on the one hand, to point out certain violations. However, they do their best not to break all obligations.
Yakovlev highlights the Council of Europe's approach to addressing violations, advocating for a focus on current policies rather than punitive measures. He discusses the improbable return of Putin to the Council due to the absence of a statute of limitations in international criminal law. Let's listen in more detail to what he has to say.
As for the Council of Europe, it is still a body that makes statements, rather than deals with revenge. In this case, there was a violation. I suggest that if there's, let's say, the violations were eliminated and a change in policy was demonstrated, then Europe would have no reason to continue its previous policy. That is, any such international body should focus on what is happening right now. However, it is highly unlikely that he, Putin, would return to world political way of working. Why? Because international criminal law does not provide for the statute of limitations. And we can actually talk about the fact that Putin can, and I hope will, be judged by the International Criminal Court. And the International Criminal Court cannot make a political decision based on the principle. Everyone has to come to an agreement with Russia. Therefore, I am terminating the proceedings. The International Criminal Court does not prosecute a person simply because it is a political decision. There are principles of international law that are simply enough. If you violate them seriously, criminal liability arises. There is no statute of limitations. That is, it is impossible in criminal proceedings at the International Criminal Court, let's say, to come to the conclusion that Russia has changed now and hence to discontinue all proceedings. It is simply impossible. No matter who asks, it is simply impossible. Because if the principle of international law is violated, there is a punishment for it. And it is impossible to stop prosecution for violation of international criminal law, let's say violation of the laws and customs of war, as is written in our code. If they are violated, then consequently punishment for them must come. And I don't think that it can be settled, let's say, even in case of a possible change in policy or some negotiations. If in principle there are violations of international law, this will be a bad precedent indicating that they can be violated further. They shall not be violated. Therefore, the way out may be completely different, but not a direct return. I think it is legally impossible.
You've been watching this special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Your course, dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find more information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!